DFS. It is Friday, October 1st here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to our Week 4 DraftKings podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schauf. With me, as always, is Jared Smola, and this podcast is sponsored by our partners at FanShare Sports. FanShare curates hundreds of pieces of daily fantasy sports-related articles, tweets, and podcasts to create the most accurate ownership projections in the industry. Those projections can be found in the lineup generator on DraftSharks.com, and you can find up-to-date ownership info anytime at fansharesports.com. Mitch Carl cannot join us tonight because everybody in his house is sick, it sounds like, Jared. But the Week 4 slate goes on, so please lay a cash QB on us for DraftKings.
Yeah, it's going to be Dak Prescott for me. And, you know, Patrick Mahomes actually checks in as our top dollars per point value at $8,100. But, yeah, to me, when you start building lineups, there's not a lot of strong, cheap plays this week. So, you know, as I was building, like, Dak was the guy who just fit. And I'm totally cool with Dak at $6,700. That feels underpriced to me. I mean, if there's a concern, it's that, you know, as we talked about on yesterday's preview pod, Dallas has been run heavy the past 2 weeks. I don't think they're going to be run heavy all season. I think it's going to be more matchup based. And, you know, Carolina's played the pass and they're run tough. But I don't think Dallas is going to be so run heavy in this game. I think there's going to be enough passing volume for Dak. And I also think Cowboys offense is going to have success. Like, Carolina's a good defense, but, you know, and how well Dak and the O-line's playing and Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, I just think, you know, there's enough here where I think Dak should pay off that price tag.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you hold off on Dak Prescott a little bit for a GPP to see if he has that ultimate tournament winning upside here, you know, both because of the Carolina defense, waiting to see if it's for real, if it's stacking up to its rating so far, and to see what the run-pass split's going to be like. But cash side, I think it's tough to make an argument against Dak Prescott. I like spending down a little bit further because I need the salary cap room, and I'll take Sam Darnold at $6K as a cash starting point here, more than Taylor Heineke, who's right in the same area in our dollars per point projections. But Taylor Heineke for $100 less than Sam Darnold, considering their two situations, I'm going to Darnold. I believe in Darnold more than Taylor Heineke in general. I believe in his wide receivers more than the group that they have for Washington right now. The Cowboys have faced the third most pass attempts in the league through 3 games. So I think it's a good situation for passing volume for Sam Darnold. They're behind only the Bucs and Rams in that category. Dallas is also favored by 5 points here, and Christian McCaffrey is out. So, I mean, that makes it an even better situation for driving up the passing volume for Sam Darnold. It should be a pass-leaning offense with Christian McCaffrey out. You can stack DJ Moore with Sam Darnold here, or just run Darnold out there without a wide receiver if you want to. He has accounted for 2 touchdowns in every game so far and given us a 300-yard bonus each of the past 2 weeks, which is big for DraftKings.
Yeah, his fantasy totals have been inflated a bit by the 3 rushing touchdowns, but Carolina is actually calling designed rushing stuff. They're calling it read options where, you know, Darnold can keep. So they're taking advantage of athleticism, which is nice. So yeah, I'm cool with Darnold if you need to save the money from Dak.
What about on the GPP side?
So tournaments, I'm going Patrick Mahomes, and you don't need to make much of an argument for Mahomes, but again, he does check in as the top value at quarterback, even at $8,100. He's only projected at 8% ownership. I do think there's another good options, you know, this week that's going to keep people off him. He's coming off 2 kind of disappointing games by his standards, but you know, KC has the second highest implied total of the week at 30.75 points behind only Buffalo. I'm not scared of Philly's defense, you know, and it's Patrick Mahomes. So again, you don't need to say a whole lot.
Yeah, I think Sam Darnold is in play here as well, but I would rather go for somebody with a higher ceiling. And I'm going to look to the other side of that Kansas City matchup. Jalen Hurts at home for $6,900. He's 10th among quarterbacks in fantasy points so far. He's topped 23 points every week. So he's been more of a floor play for fantasy so far, but he showed us that ceiling, especially if you look back to last season. So we know it's there. Jalen Hurts is second to only Lamar Jackson in rushing yards among quarterbacks. He's facing one of the league's worst defenses through 3 weeks. He's a heavy home underdog. So either the Eagles make this game closer, as every Chiefs game has been so far, or they fall behind. And frankly, either of those situations could play out positively for Jalen Hurts' fantasy value. All we have to do, I think, if you're not ready to accept the case for Jalen Hurts, look back to week 2, where he went 12 of 23 passing against the 49ers. His team scored 11 total points, and Jalen Hurts still finished QB 12 and top 20 fantasy points. So you put all that together, he's just 7th or 8th among quarterbacks in projected ownership, depending on whether you count Justin Fields in that. And you get to run back Chiefs on the other side. You can play Tyreek Hill, you can play Travis Kelce for the game stack without necessarily having Patrick Mahomes in that salary.
Yeah, I was going to ask, who would you stack Hurts with any of his receivers?
I think there are options. I don't think anybody is a must stack because we can have Jalen Hurts have a big game without any of his pass catchers having a big game. I think options are Devontae Smith at 3%, although at 3% projected ownership, his salary is a little bit high for what we should expect from him for now, but it's certainly possible that those two go off together. There's also Dallas Goedert at 4,800. I'm not sure I'll get to him at that price, especially because Zach Ertz is also available at 3,500 and just 1.5% projected ownership. I think it's possible to put both Zach Ertz and Travis Kelce as a flex in the same lineup.
Yeah, I don't love any of the prices on the Eagles pass catchers. So if I'm playing a Hurts lineup, it'd probably be Hurts without any Eagles, and then either Kelce or Tyreek Hill as the game stack.
Yeah, and I like having those options as part of the Hurts package this week.
Yep.
Running back for cash. I guess first question is, what are you doing with $8,800 Derrick Henry on a deserted offensive island in Tennessee?
Yeah, I'm scared not to play him. I do think there are enough running back options where he's not a must play. And again, it is a pretty tight pricing week on DraftKings without a whole lot of cheapies to really like. So I don't think Henry's a must play. He's obviously a great play though, because he's a lock for 20 plus carries. He might get 30. He's very likely going to get the 100-yard bonus. He's even doing more in the passing game so far this season. He already has 12 catches on 13 targets, and he should continue to get usage there this week with those wide receiver injuries. So Henry's obviously a great play. It's just, does he fit in your optimal lineup? Otherwise, I like DeAndre Swift for $6,200. I still think that's too cheap for the passing game usage he's getting. He's second among running backs with 23 targets and 19 catches. There's talk this week that he's going to do even more going forward. I think that, groin injury is getting further behind him, and that, the Bears defense is just not one to be afraid of. They're 17th in Football Outsiders run defense rankings. They're 23rd in Football Outsiders running back coverage ranking. So, plus matchup on the ground and in the passing game for DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I wish at this point that I had been drafting some more DeAndre Swift now. I could admit that in preseason and in full season. Only Najee Harris ahead of him in targets and catches among running backs. And Najee Harris cheated last week to do that. So it should be DeAndre Swift in first place there. I agree with you on the price. He's scored the 4th most points per game at the position, and all 3 guys ahead of him cost at least $1,500 more on DK right now. So DeAndre Swift is a pretty easy play, especially in the full PPR. If I don't want to pay up for Derrick Henry, I think other options include Zeke Elliott, 6,500, Jonathan Taylor, 6,300, Antonio Gibson, 61, David Montgomery, 58. None of those guys is comfy enough for me to lean on him. And frankly, a lack of comfort in those guys might make me either go up to Derrick Henry or go down to somebody who is similarly uncomfortable, but at least gives me some spending flexibility.
Yeah, I think Zeke and Montgomery are my kind of the other guys I'd consider for cash. Zeke, again, even with Tony Pollard doing what he's been doing, Zeke's been getting running back 1 usage and has produced as an RB1 the past 2 weeks now. And then Montgomery at $5,800. I mean, it hasn't translated to big fantasy numbers, but his usage has been awesome, both on the ground and in the passing game as far as, share of the carries and share of the targets. He obviously needs the Bears offense to be better than it was last week. I think it will be, whether it's Fields or Dalton, mostly just because the matchup's so much better, at home for the Lions, versus on the road in Cleveland last week.
And I mean, it just has to be. Even if they do everything the same, it can't be as bad as last week.
Yep.
On the GPP side, I think it might be even tougher to get away from Derrick Henry here. I mean, he's headed for high ownership, so you want to fade him, but he's primed for like 30 carries, maybe more in this game. So, I mean, if you're giving Derrick Henry 30 plus carries, he's a solid bet for a couple of touchdowns. He might just end up being that running back that you have to win a tournament.
Yeah, I mean, even if he's 20-30% owned, which I think he will be, he's not a guy I'd want to like full fade if I'm making a whole bunch of lineups. Otherwise, again, I like Zeke in tournaments. I just, he always has 2 touchdown upside in that Cowboys offense. And then Jonathan Taylor's a guy I've been waffling on. 6,300 feels like a good price. I don't think game script is going to get away from the Colts against Miami. Taylor's just due for some positive touchdown regression. He has league high 6 carries inside the 5-yard line, but hasn't scored yet. But I mean, Carson Wentz is still banged up. Colts O-line is banged up. Quentin Nelson's out of this game. So, that definitely has me, I would not play JT in cash. But in tournaments, I'm still going to consider him and probably will mix him into quite a few lineups.
Yeah, that's where I'm leaning as well. He's risky because of his lack of receiving, a sluggish O-line to this point, and the Carson Wentz stuff. But there is big upside. You mentioned touchdown regression. Dolphins have also allowed the second most running back points so far, so it's a positive matchup. There's a 2-touchdown Jonathan Taylor game coming at some point. I would like to be on board in DFS when that happens. And then back to Derrick Henry before we move away from running backs. I think that one way to differentiate with a Derrick Henry lineup is to run it back with Corey Davis for the Jets at 4% projected ownership at $5,000 bucks. So then, you're not so much worried about differentiating at running back. You get the Derrick Henry points, and then you can still game stack it with Corey Davis to kind of get some leverage there.
Yep, like it.
Wide receiver for cash. What are you playing?
So, I mean, CD Lamb and DJ Moore stick out to me at $6,700 for Lamb, $6,600 for Moore. Lamb's coming off a disappointing week 3. You had just the 3 targets. Dallas didn't throw much in that game, but I mean, he had 24 targets over the first 2 weeks of the season. I think that's more indicative of his volume going forward. So like Lamb, like Moore, he has 31 targets through the first 3 weeks of the season. That's 6th most among wide receivers. And then the last guy I like for cash is Odell Beckham, which might be surprising for a guy, in just his second game coming off a torn ACL, but I mean, it was very encouraging last week. He ran a route on 85% of the pass plays, 29% target share. Jarvis Landry remains out, so I think you're going to see Beckham, again, probably around 25-30% of the targets. And the matchup's really good against Minnesota. They've allowed the 4th most DraftKings points to wide receiver. So $5,800 for like a clear number 1 wide receiver that we know is talented. I don't think he's as risky as you might think he is.
Yeah, I am not surprised because I have him down as well. It's tough, like you said, to look past the wideouts in that Carolina-Dallas game. But Odell Beckham, as you mentioned, number 1 wide receiver, he's in the 5K range. He's in a setting that could drive up passing volume. Cleveland's at Minnesota this week. The Vikings on offense are 3rd in the league in yards, 8th in points. So they're moving the ball. They're scoring points. This has some shootout potential. And even in a game last week where it was a one-sided win for Cleveland, we got plenty of targets to support Odell Beckham at this salary. So I like him in cash as well. On the GPP side, it looks like DK Metcalf is going to go under-owned. He's played the 49ers 4 times over the past 2 years. He's seen at least 9 targets in each of those games, caught 6+ passes in 3 of those 4 games. And the other came in the second half of last year where everything was bad in the Seattle passing game. The first matchup last season produced a monster fantasy line, 12 catches, 161, 2 touchdowns. This time, Metcalf's coming off a 100-yard game. He's seen 20 targets over the past 2 weeks. He's headed for 3.6% projected ownership. So, I mean, if that continues, I'm definitely going to be playing some Metcalf, whether it's a Russell Wilson lineup or not.
Yeah, and Tyler Lockett seems, questionable. I think he's going to play. He returned to practice today on Friday, so I think he's going to be out there, but I think he's going to be at less than 100%. So I think you might see more action go Metcalf's way. So I love Metcalf, and I am going to do like a mini game stack with Metcalf and Brandon Ayuk at $5,000. Projected for just 3% ownership, which I'm surprised about. I feel like, after Ayuk finally got back in that full-time role last week, people would want to, pile back on him. Maybe the ownership projection's off. We'll see. But I think $5,000 is a good price for, a good matchup against Seattle. Again, Ayuk was up to a 90% route rate last week. Saw 15% target share, a decent number. You like to be a bit higher, but I think it definitely could be going forward. So I like Metcalf, Ayuk, and kind of hope that Niners Seahawks game shoots out.
Yeah, and I think there are probably just too many wideouts for Brandon Ayuk to get too much attention this week.
Yep, for sure.
Over to tight end for cash. Evan Ingram at $3,000 is definitely a starting point for me at this position. 3rd on the team in targets in his return last week, even at less than full playing time. Behind only Saquon Barkley and Colin Johnson, though. So that's a very fragile top of the target tree for the Giants. Certainly easy to see Evan Ingram climbing that this week. The Saints are good in tight end coverage again, which they have been for several years now. But I'm chasing volume here. I'm chasing target volume with Evan Ingram. I'm not chasing ultimate ceiling with him at $3,000 in my cash lineup. So, if he gets 8 targets and catches 4 of them for 40 yards, I'm okay with that. I would like more, but that's okay for $3,000 here.
Yeah, I'm using Ingram and cash. I don't really want to, but again, we have to fit all these guys into a salary cap, and we haven't really mentioned any cheap guys yet. So Ingram's kind of the spot to save money, and it's really just a volume play, with Shepard and Slayton out of this game. Ingram, by the way, is not even listed on the Week 4 injury report, so he is healthy for now. Hopefully he stays healthy throughout this game. But again, it's really just a price play and projected volume for Ingram.
Mm-hmm. GPP side, what do you like?
So I'm going to be playing Kelsey in my Mahomes tournament teams, even at $8,100. Just find a way to fit him in there. I also like Kyle Pitts. I'm going to go back to him, $5,000. He's projected under 10% ownership because he's just been disappointing so far. But the usage has been awesome. He's top 7 among tight ends in pass routes and targets and air yards and expected fantasy points. I still think he's a really good player. The concern has been Matt Ryan. He just needs Ryan to find him a couple times to pay off. And Washington, by the way, is 28th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to tight ends. It's been a disappointing defense so far, and that's included defending tight ends.
And you look at the Washington defense and say there's talent. There's so much talent. It's bound to rebound at some point. One spot where they're really not awesome is safety, and they haven't figured out how to line up their safeties yet. They've been waffling on playing time among their top 3 there. So they haven't figured it out. I think that's certainly good for opposing tight ends to this point. The big guys are obviously in play here. I already mentioned Zach Ertz as a possibility at 3,500 for a Jalen Hurts lineup, especially if I'm running him with Tyreek Hill in that game. But I also want to throw out Mike Gesicki or whatever, however you say his name. 12 targets last week. I think that's worth chasing in a tournament lineup for 4K and low projected ownership. A negative matchup for Jalen Waddle in this one in the slot against the Colts. So maybe that pushes a little bit more toward Gesicki. And otherwise, Will Fuller is going to play, but whoever knows how healthy that guy is. He's dealing with the chest and elbow issues. I don't know. We'll see how involved he is. Either way, I think it's worth chasing the target count from last week for Gesicki in this game.
Yeah, I like that one for tournaments. I want to pump up Anthony Ferguson one more time this week too. He's $3,100 on DraftKings. I think people are going to use Evan Ingram down at that price tag over Ferguson. I think there's a real chance Ferguson leads Tennessee in targets this weekend, and the matchup's obviously good against the Jets. So $3,100. I like him for tournaments.
It is definitely fair to say that there's a real chance. It's also fair to say there's a real chance Chester Rogers leads the Titans in targets this week.
Sure is.
Over to defense, I like the Colts for $2,700 at Jacoby Brissett, projected for single-digit ownership behind the Falcons and the Lions. I think that helps the Colts for tournaments. So, across formats here, I like the price. I like the talent, even though the Colts haven't been lighting up on defense so far. Most of all, I like the matchup against Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, that's where I'm leaning too. And the Colts have a lot of injuries too. Kwity Paye is out, Kari Willis, Rocky Sin. So, and they've been disappointing in real life. They've actually been decent in fantasy so far, though. They have 6 takeaways and 5 sacks through 3 games. They're 9th among main slate defenses in DK points per game. So they've been fine there. But like you said, it's just a matchup against a backup quarterback and a $2,700 price tag.
Yeah. I think otherwise, if you don't want the Colts, the Packers at 3,300 look like they're going to go under-owned despite the Bengals going into Pittsburgh last week and finishing 6th among fantasy defenses.
Yes, Packers is who I'm trying to get up to for tournaments for sure. I just think picking on Big Ben all season is going to work out in the long run. Then if you want to get super cheap, just matchup-based plays, I think Atlanta at 2,300 at home for Taylor Heineke. I swear, Taylor Heineke is just like a young Ryan Fitzpatrick. He plays so similarly. And then even Detroit at 2,200. We saw what a mess the Bears' offense is right now, so I think there's some upside to the Lions.
I'm surprised that there's not more love for the Packers defense this week. I actually had somebody email us this week, a subscriber email us, asking us why we had the Packers ranked so high because they let us down in week 1. We ranked them high against the Saints. It's because of what the Bengals just did to Ben Roethlisberger last week and the way that Ben Roethlisberger looks in general. That's just going to be a positive matchup going forward.
Yeah, the Packers aren't a good D. There's no arguing that, but I think as we saw last night, Cincinnati's not a great D either, and they just put up a big fantasy outing against Pittsburgh.
Exactly. So that's going to do it for this week 4 DraftKings podcast. Head over to draftsharks.com to get more player recommendations. If you're a DS insider, then you can check out Jared's cash game picks as well as top GPP options from Corey Bushland. You can also mess around with our lineup generator to build your own lineups with the help of the DS projections and FanShare ownership projections. For more discussion of DFS and all other formats, you can also join the free Draft Sharks Discord. Find the link to do so in the description for this podcast. If you are with us on the stream here, stick around. We're going to hit the FanDuel side in just a minute after a quick break. For Jared Smola and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaff saying thanks so much for swimming with us. It is Friday, October 1st here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to our Week 4 FanDuel podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schaff. With me, as always, is Jared Smola, and this podcast is sponsored by our partners at FanShare Sports. FanShare curates hundreds of pieces of daily fantasy sports-related articles, tweets, and podcasts to create the most accurate ownership projections in the industry. Those projections can be found in the lineup generator on DraftSharks.com, and you can find up-to-date ownership info anytime at fansharesports.com. Jared, FanDuel side, cash QB, what are you playing?
Josh Allen for me, $8,500. Obviously home for Houston. Buffalo, 32-point implied total. In Buffalo's last 19 games dating back to the start of last season, Josh Allen has accounted for 79% of the Bills' offensive touchdowns, 53 of their 67 scores. So, if Buffalo's going to score 4 or 5 times on Sunday, and I think they will, Allen's going to get 3 or 4 of those. And I'm not worried about Buffalo going run heavy, even with positive games here, because they just don't go run heavy. So Allen's just super safe to me.
Yeah, Buffalo going run heavy is no longer a thing. So don't worry about it. If they score points, Josh Allen's going to be involved. It's easier to pay up for a cash QB over here, so I'm doing that as well. I like Dak Prescott and Russell Wilson at 7,700. I like Matthew Stafford at 7,800. We'll see when I'm building lineups if my build allows me to go higher than that. But I think this trio gives me just as much upside as the guys that are a little bit more expensive. All 3 of these quarterbacks are involved in the top 4 over-under games for the week. Wilson probably seems a little bit less obvious than either Dak or Matthew Stafford, but the Niners have allowed all 3 QBs they've faced so far to top 20 fantasy points. It's Jared Goff, Jalen Hurts, and then Aaron Rodgers most recently. Russ is coming off a meh game last week, but the Seahawks scored 28 and 30 points the 2 games before that, so I'm not worried about him in general.
Yep, like that play. I think in tournaments, I'm going to have a pretty tight core at quarterback. For me, it's just going to be Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Dak Prescott. Mahomes, $8,700, more expensive than Josh Allen, so that's going to keep his ownership down. And Mahomes is always capable of going for 30. And then Dak, I like the price at $7,700 at home. Dallas has the 4th highest implied total on the week. So, Carolina's defense has been good so far, but Vegas is not scared of the matchup. Carolina just lost first-round rookie corner J.C. Horn, so that's going to hurt the pass defense. I'll just bet on CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper making enough plays to, carry Dak to a nice fantasy game.
Yeah, and if the Carolina defense is for real, I think it's much more likely that they contain the Dallas run game than the pass game. I'm not worried about them shutting down Dak Prescott and these wideouts.
Agreed.
I also want to throw in Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf, who appear to be going low owned this week, and probably because of all the quarterbacks we've mentioned so far. 4.5% projected ownership for Russell Wilson, 3.6% for DK Metcalf. I'll be curious to see if that holds up into Sunday morning. But if it does, I'm definitely going to target this duo for all the upside that we all know that they have. And I mentioned it on the DraftKings side, but DK Metcalf put up a monster game his first meeting with the Niners last year. The Tyler Lockett injury could even shift more targets toward Metcalf in this game. So I think there's plenty of upside to support them, and the low ownership just makes them all the more attractive. I also like running back Deebo Samuel at $6,900. It's not sneaky, but he's just 8th in projected ownership, so it's not a chalky pick. And the 6,900, I think, is still low for somebody who's been operating as the clear number 1. I mean, we'll see if Brandon Ayuk gets closer to that this week, but it hasn't been so far, so I'm not worried about Ayuk chipping away at Deebo Samuel this week. And of course, if Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf hit their ultimate ceiling, I think we're going to see more passing volume overall for San Francisco. And the Niners have George Kittle dealing with a calf injury, which is pushing me away from him, and I think making the wide receivers even that much better plays.
Yeah, it's a good point about Kittle. I'm on Ayuk more as the kind of run back with Metcalf. I love the Metcalf play. Ayuk $5,700 on FanDuel. I think he's worth a shot. He's only projected at 3% ownership.
Mm-hmm. Cash running back, what do you like?
And Jonathan Taylor pops as a value here at $6,600. It feels trappy to me. I mean, his floor is just low because he doesn't have that passing game role. I like the matchup here against Miami. I think he should have rushing volume, but again, there's the passing game concerns. There's offensive line concerns. Quentin Nelson is out of this game, so I don't know. I'm not sure if I'll end up playing Taylor in cash on FanDuel. I do like Zeke Elliott at $7,000 on FanDuel. He's even with Pollard doing what he's been doing. Zeke is getting RB1 usage, so 70 or $7,000 as a big home favorite with a nice implied total. It feels like a good price for Zeke.
Yeah, I agree. I have Zeke Elliott first down here at 7K as well. I mean, like we've said multiple times, we'll see about the Carolina defense, but even if they contain the run game, if Dallas is still moving the ball, Zeke Elliott's going to have scoring opportunities. Dallas is the fourth highest implied total on the main slate. So you like the situation overall for scoring. And Zeke's coming off 2 straight weeks of more than 16 FanDuel points. So he's scoring points after the scary week 1 that got us all panicking. I agree on Jonathan Taylor as well. Cheap enough to be in consideration at $6,600, but not quite safe enough to make me feel good about putting him into a cash lineup. DeAndre Swift, I think at 7,700 is also in play here. Certainly a bit less attractive when you're not getting full points for every reception, but you're still getting a half point for every reception. DeAndre Swift is going to be heavily involved in whatever Detroit does in this game.
Yeah, I'd say Swift is like appropriately priced on FanDuel, so I think he's an option. I like Aaron Jones in cash too at $7,400. The matchup's tough against Pittsburgh, but I think the Packers offense in general will have success against the Steelers, and Jones has just been getting awesome usage with Jamal Williams gone.
I do prefer Taylor on the GPP side for all the reasons we mentioned. There is touchdown regression coming. The matchup is good. Miami has allowed the second most running back points to this stage. I want to be on board when Jonathan Taylor starts his scoring because it could come in a bunch. It could come this week. There are issues, so it's not a definite. You don't feel like you need to play Jonathan Taylor this week, but things are set up for him to do at least okay, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we want better than at least okay in tournaments, but yeah, I'm going to take some shots on Taylor in tournaments for sure. I like Darrell Henderson for tournaments as well. $6,000. And there's obviously a risk coming off the rib injury. Sean McVay said today that Henderson's going to play. The question is, does he go back to the role he was playing before the rib injury? If he does, he's a smash at $6,000 in a good matchup against Arizona. So that's kind of the gamble you're taking in tournaments. Even if his role is reduced, even if he gets 2/3 of the running back work, he could still pay off his price tag. But if he is getting feature back usage again, he's a good bet to return big value at $6,000.
Mm-hmm. Certainly on the if-then statement, there's upside. It scares me to play him with a rib injury going into the game, but the upside is definitely there, and his ownership should be down. Derrick Henry at $10,200 on FanDuel. What are we doing with him?
I mean, it's FanDuel. It's I wouldn't say it's easy to fit him in, but you definitely can, and you don't feel like crap about the rest of your lineup. So if I'm making like one tournament lineup, I probably wouldn't end up playing Henry. But if you're playing 10 or more, I think you definitely want to mix him in because he could easily be the running back you have to win tournaments this week.
Yeah, especially without full PPR scoring, I think you got to have some Derrick Henry involved. And for what it's worth, I would rather go up to Henry at 10-2 than play Dalvin Cook at 9,000 with his injury. Yep. Alvin Kamara is also at the same price as Dalvin Cook, I believe, over here. I would rather play Kamara than Dalvin Cook, and I'd rather go down to Aaron Jones than play Dalvin Cook this week.
Yeah, to me, it's either Henry or going down to that Jones territory.
I want to say too, Tony Pollard is a little bit interesting at $5,600. It's a little close to Darrell Henderson, but I mean, he's been getting enough usage to have upside. He's getting Kareem Hunt type usage. And if the Carolina defense is for real and shuts down Zeke Elliott, maybe Tony Pollard is a matchup beater. If Dallas has trouble in other areas, maybe Tony Pollard is somebody that Carolina doesn't have an answer for. And overall, it's just it's pieces of the Dallas offense. And honestly, Tony Pollard's one of those that I make a case for when I'm putting down notes. And when I'm setting lineups, I don't ultimately probably use him. But I don't know. He was interesting enough for me to feel like maybe I should mention.
Yeah, I don't make enough lineups to get to someone like Pollard. To me, he's not discounted enough to use him.
That's me too. Wide receiver for cash, what do you like, Jared?
It's interesting. I was looking at our dollars per point rankings at wide receiver. Our top 9 values are all $7,100 or more. So there's no like strong, cheap wide receiver plays. There is one, I guess. It's Odell Beckham to me $6,600. Just for the usage he got in his first game back, 29% of Cleveland's targets. I think he's going to be there most games until Jarvis Landry returns. Matchup's good too against Minnesota. So I like OBJ in cash, and then I like Devontae Adams in cash too. $8,100. I think he's actually underpriced there. I obviously had the disappointing week 1, but he has 27 targets over the last 2 weeks, 20 catches. And the Steelers' pass D has not been good. They're 23rd in Football Outsiders DVOA against the pass. And they're also 22nd in coverage against number 1 wide receiver. So, all the pieces are there for another big Devontae Adams game.
And they're 6th in run defense DVOA, so they look like a pass funnel defense. And Green Bay seems like the kind of team that recognizes stuff like that and gears the game plan toward what they're facing in that area. I agree. There are lots of options at wide receiver up in that range. So if you need somebody to help fit the salary, I think Corey Davis is in play for cash at $5,700. He's not the clear number 1 wide receiver because he only has 1 more target than Braxton Berrios so far, but I would still call Corey Davis the odds-on favorite to lead the Jets in targets in this game. He's seen solid 21% target share to this point, 7, 5, and 10 targets in his 3 games. And he's priced at a level that's not going to kill you if he doesn't pay off, if he just gives you 5 or 6 points this week. The Titans are 28th in overall defensive DVOA. So it is a spot where Corey Davis could do some stuff with what he gets. And if the Jets fall behind, there's more passing volume. I'm not sure I am willing to bet on Tennessee getting way ahead in this one unless they get turnovers and just Derrick Henry scores every time he touches the ball.
Yeah, no Elijah Moore this week either for the Jets, so that opens up some more targets for Corey Davis.
But Jamison Crowder back, so we'll see what that means, if anything. It didn't mean anything in the preseason when it was 800 targets for Corey Davis and 2 for Jamison Crowder.
All right.
Those are exact numbers, by the way. GPP side, what do you like at wide out?
Yeah, so I mentioned Brandon Ayuk. I do like him at $5,700. And the other guy, I'm going to go back to Stephon Diggs. I was all over Buffalo's passing game last week. Unfortunately, I had Diggs in all those Josh Allen lineups, which prevented me from getting to the top of tournaments. But I'm going to go back to Diggs at $8,000. Projected at just 8% ownership. Again, the Bills should put up 40 points in this game. That probably means 3-4 passing touchdowns for Josh Allen. And all the usage you want to see from Stephon Diggs has been there. He's 8th in targets. He's 3rd in air yards. He's even 6th among wide receivers in end zone targets. So he's had touchdown opportunities. So a big game is coming, and home for Houston is probably about the best time you can ask for it to come.
Yeah, he caught my eye with a single-digit ownership this week. I think it's just going to be easy for him to get lost a little bit at wide receiver this week because there are so many high-end options. But if the Bills are scoring points, it's more often than not going to be involving Stephon Diggs. Yep. If Terry McLaurin remains in the mid-single digits in projected ownership come Sunday morning, then I'm going to be ready to fire him up. He's 5th in our FanDuel dollars per point rankings right now. I think he's in play for cash as well because of that. The price is good. I believe it's $7,100 on FanDuel. There's no Tre'Davious White in Atlanta, and even against White and the Bills last week, McLaurin was fine. 4 catches, 62 yards, 7 targets. We would certainly like more than that. I definitely think there is upside to get more than that. We saw that the week before against the Giants when he got 14 targets from Taylor Heineke and caught 11. So I think there's plenty of upside. I think there's decent floor here. I'm surprised that Terry McLaurin doesn't have a higher projected ownership level right now.
Yeah, me too. And just to skip ahead, I like a McLaurin, Kyle Pitts little game stack. I think that Washington Atlanta game could be a sneaky shootout.
I don't want to have too many players in that game. That game could be a stinky shootout too.
It definitely could go either way.
Tight end, what do you like for cash?
Travis Kelce, as usual on FanDuel, pops as the top dollars per point play. We've talked about it. The gap between him and the other guys isn't as big here. So try to get Kelce in your cash lineup. If you need to save money, I think TJ Hawkinson is still in play despite last week's dud. I mean, you got to stick with a guy, get in the type of usage he's gotten, even despite that down game last week. So he's $6,600. And then if you need to go cheaper, I like Logan Thomas at $5,800. A guy I don't play often, but he's just so consistent. Like, he's not going to win you tournaments. Like, I don't like him in tournaments. He just hasn't really shown a ceiling, but he's good for 4 or 5 catches every game. I think he's a decent touchdown bet in this matchup. So, he's not going to kill you in cash games.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Travis Kelce. I think TJ Hawkinson is an option as well if you need the $1,600 extra dollars in salary. Not a good one for him last week, but I think more often than not, TJ Hawkinson's going to be solid. And there's nothing scary in either the Eagles or Bears defenses for that tight end matchup. The Bears haven't given up anything big to tight ends so far, but they did allow 5 for 68 to Tyler Higbee on 6 targets in week 1, touchdown to Austin Hooper last week. You go below that, and there are just multiple options, such as the guys you named. On the GPP side, what do you like for tight end?
Yeah, it's Pitts for me. So he's 5th among tight ends in our expected fantasy points model. So he's getting all the usage. He just needs Matt Ryan to stop sucking. Give him the ball. And again, the matchup's good here as well. Washington 28th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to tight ends.
Yeah, betting on that old football player to rebound is always a good bet to make. Noah Fant, I think, is intriguing at $5,700. The Ravens have allowed more PPR points to tight ends than any other team has so far. Now, granted, they started off the season with Darren Waller and Travis Kelce, but both of those guys went over 100 yards. So it wasn't just like they produced big time against the Ravens. TJ Hawkinson only had 2 catches against Baltimore last week. He only got 2 targets. I haven't watched that game back to see if they were just all over him in coverage or if it was just a lack of opportunity and that's how the game went. Either way, Noah Fant has, within his range of outcomes here, the potential to lead the Broncos in targets. So I think at 5,700 in a tournament lineup, I'm willing to take a shot on that.
Like it.
Defense, what do you like?
The Packers stuck out to me at $4,200, just attacking Ben Roethlisberger. Chase Claypool, I don't think he's going to play. He popped up on the injury report Thursday and then did not practice on Friday. So like any threat of a downfield passing game is gone for Pittsburgh now. It's just going to make it easier on the Packers defense.
Yeah, I agree. I would like to get up to the Packers at 4,200, especially since their ownership is not going to be in the double digits, it looks like. I think a sneaky one is the Broncos at 4,200, same price at home against Baltimore. The Ravens have actually been a positive scoring matchup for fantasy defenses so far this season. Then if you're looking down in the cheaper range, the Jets, Seattle, both interesting because of their low salaries. 3,000 for the Jets against Tennessee, 3,300 for Seattle against Jimmy Garoppolo, and that is the case for the Seattle defense. Both of those defenses also look like they're going to be at a higher owned rate because of those low salaries, though. So I'd throw in the Giants as well as a sneakier, cheaper defense in a matchup with Jameis Winston.
Yeah, I had the Giants down as a tournament play. I also like both sides of that Washington-Atlanta game. I think there's just takeaway upside with both of those quarterbacks. Then I think the Rams are sneaky too at $3,800. I mean, Kyler Murray's been awesome. They've been putting a lot of points on the board, but Kyler Murray also has 4 interceptions already. He's taken 5 sacks, and we know there's plenty of talent on that Rams defense. And it's going to be a game where Kyler's probably going to have to drop back 40 plus times. That just gives you the upside. So even if the Rams give up 24 points, they could have a good fantasy day here.
Yeah, I was looking at them as well. I'm also looking at Miami at 4,000 against the Colts at home. Mentioned it on the Thursday podcast. They've been the lowest variance defense in the league so far in performance, according to Football Outsiders. And now they get Carson Wentz on 2 bad ankles without his top O-lineman. Yep. I mean, there's definite upside to that. Just don't play them in the lineup where you have Jonathan Taylor.
Right. Miami has a takeaway in it's like 20 straight games or something too. But now that I mention it, they're not going to get one this week.
Yeah, way to jinx it. Well, that seems like a good place to end our Week 4 FanDuel podcast. Head over to DraftSharks.com now. You can get more player recommendations. Kevin English has your cash game picks for FanDuel. Corey Bushland has your top GPP options. And then play around with the lineup generator to build your own lineups with the help of the DS projections and FanShare ownership projections. For more discussion of DFS and other formats, you can also join the free Draft Sharks Discord. You can find the link to do just that in the description for this podcast. For Jared Smola and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaff saying thanks so much for swimming with us.